All right, guys, welcome to episode 19 of Almost in Agreement. Testing out a new intro sound piece. Sam's over here laughing at me. I'm excited about it. We have Jesse Mayshark from Compass Knox who's sitting down with us tonight. He is the better educated print version of what we pretend like we're trying to do on this show when we do our interviews. So he's probably got a little bit more in-depth. If you guys remember the Kyle Ward episode, he talks about behind the curtain. I'm guessing Jesse knows a little bit about what's going on the other side of the curtain too. So we're going to talk to him for a little bit. And we're going to we'll end up into some of the normal topics we do, but we're going to use, we're going to use the time we have with a guy that knows better than we do about some of the stuff going on locally. Voting started yesterday here in Knoxville, and so saw some reports of some pretty good numbers already turned out. So we'll get going from there, and it's the 18th of July, 2020. Episode 19 of Almost in Agreement is now underway. So, Jesse, that's the main one to me right now. Is the News Sentinel at least put out like 2,500 people already voted today, and then they've said something along the lines of like a couple thousand. I want to say it was like 6,500 online or mail-in ballot requests already processed. I can't remember that number.
Sure. Well, they've first of all, thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here. The first day of early voting, they had about 2,500 people show up at the polls, which is a pretty good turnout for this particular election. You know, the August election is a bit of an odd one because it's the county general election and the state and federal primary.
Right.
And we don't have a gubernatorial race this year, so you tend to have not as big a turnout, but 2,500 people in the first day is a lot. And
I take full credit for that. That is our show.
Yeah, and they've actually had about 10,000 requests already for absentee ballots,
okay.
And about 2,500 of those already came in. So we've already got 5,000 votes cast in this election, essentially.
Wow, that is impressive.
Which,
go Knoxville.
You know, we don't know for sure if that's going to hold up or, you know, but that it seems likely that the turnout for this election is going to be much higher than the same election 4 years ago.
You going to make some predictions? You got predictions ready?
In terms of who's going to win?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the races are pretty easy to call. I think the interesting ones are the ones that are hard to predict.
Right.
So, you know, at the local level, we have a couple of county commission races that I think are very interesting. The first district has an independent candidate running against the Democratic candidate, Daisha Lundy. I don't think that one's likely to be very close. I think Daisha Lundy is probably going to win that pretty handily. The second district, though, which is where I live in North Knoxville.
So we're talking county right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
These are Knox County Commission races. Right?
Yeah, because I had both the second district on earlier this week, and talked to both of them.
Right. Courtney Durrett and Grant Rosenberg, right?
Yeah.
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 So that's a really interesting race. This district is kind of a swing district. There are not many swing districts in Knox County. Basically, there's one very Democratic district, which is the first district.
Right.
And then there's 7 mostly Republican districts. And then there's the second district, which is pretty evenly split. I would say it probably leans a little bit Democratic. But I think that's going to be a close race.
Right.
And they're both, you know, as I'm sure you saw when you talk to them, they're both very knowledgeable, smart,
right.
articulate candidates.
I think the teacher card for Courtney plays well, especially right now.
I agree. I think that's a big help to her, and I also think that the momentum in the second district has been stronger on the Democratic side. Gloria Johnson, who's the state rep,
right.
whose district kind of overlays this area, she performed really well here in 2018. Jennifer Owen, school board candidate, was running in a nonpartisan race, but it was one where basically everybody knew she was a Democrat and her opponent was a Republican.
Right.
And she did really well in March. So I think the voting is trending more Democratic. I think Grant Rosenberg's maybe a little bit better known because he worked for a former county mayor and he's kind of been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I have seen some Grant Rosenberg signs in some yards alongside some Democratic candidate signs. So I think he's getting some crossover support.
Well, I think
that one's going to be close.
And talking to him, to me, neither of them. I mean, if anything, if I was going to pick out from my conversation, which was not like a well structured. I didn't pick like specific topics to really hammer them on. If anything, I didn't really. I felt like Grant was not as traditionally Republican as I would, as you would see. Like, I mean, he seemed like, one of our standard questions always comes up with Max, the guy who's in Mexico right now. He's got a bunch of crap in his yard, and he gets in trouble all the time from the county for it. And any other Republican we've ever talked to about it is like, no, that doesn't make sense. The county should leave you alone.
Right.
And Grant was here. It's like, well, I mean, there's reasons for these things and stuff like that. And that's what he did. He basically ran that office when he was working for the mayor back in the day.
Right.
And so he has better knowledge of it, obviously. But then Courtney was more like, nah, I mean, whatever. Just as long as it's not like a junkyard in your yard, that's not that big a deal. And so like little stuff like that, like in talking to them, neither of them really jumped out as like hard Democrat or hard Republican. And especially in the district like you're talking about, since it's kind of a purple district, for lack of a better word, both of them are very purple candidates. At least they felt that way to me. I get the joy of not having to make that decision because it's not my district.
No, I think that's a fair read of both of them. Neither of them are super ideological, and I think they're also both kind of attuned to the fact that the district is kind of mixed, and also, those kinds of issues, local zoning issues, and that kind of thing, don't necessarily tend to be ideological. Even on county commission, when they have split votes, a lot of those kinds of votes don't come down to parties.
Right.
There are a lot of other things that factor into it.
Right. Well, that was something that
So,
Grant, Grant was talking
true.
about that too. He was like, he's like, if it was up to me, these county races wouldn't be partisan anyway. That's his
Well,
argument.
and city council races are not partisan.
Right.
I worked for the city of Knoxville for about 6 years, and one of the things I enjoyed about that was that it was a nonpartisan system.
Right.
I mean, I worked for Mayor Rojero, who everybody knew was a Democrat, but that wasn't like, we had Republicans in very senior level positions in the administration, and nobody cared because the vast majority of the issues that we dealt with just didn't really break down along those lines. And that is also true at the county level in terms of the issues.
Right.
But all of the county offices, except for the school board, are partisan, and so you kind of end up with party politics coming into it.
Right. I mean, and that's what's weird too, is because like I had the public defender guys on, and it's like that doesn't make sense to be a partisan race,
or even necessarily an elected office. Like there are states, Kentucky,
right, which is where Sharif's from. He was talking about that when he was here.
Right, exactly. They don't even have elected positions for public defender. There's no particular reason that has to be an elected office. It was something that came out. Tennessee started electing them in, I think, the early 1990s.
Yeah. It's the Stevens.
Yes. Yeah, Mark Stevens, literally the only public defender Knox County has ever had.
Right, and he's retiring, and I've got mine wandering around here too, so don't worry about it. Yeah, and so it's Eric replacing his boss, who he's already sort of replaced, versus Sharif, and that's an interesting one to me too. It's like I don't know what the reasoning behind it being an elected office is, but just thinking about it as a, like talking to both of them, they're like, Stevens was great. We want to continue to expand what Stevens doing. Right. It's like, what am I picking out of you two?
It's hard to find a lot of difference from them. And Eric Lutton obviously has the advantage of experience there. He's in the office. He's currently serving as the as the public defender. And I think that I know people in the public defender's office who feel very strongly about supporting him because they know him. He's their guy, kind of. But Sharif has not indicated that he would come in and make any wholesale changes. Or
that's what I mean. Yeah, that's
continue the same work.
Right, like those interviews were especially interesting to me, is because like I have no idea what to ask you, because I don't even know what your office really does. I know the base, watching Law and Order version of what the public defender's office does, but like especially ours being unique and the special things that our public defender office does, which I think is fantastic. And I've told everybody I've talked to since those interviews that as county commissioner, they need to support that office the best they can, because that's the coolest thing I think Knoxville's doing.
It's really remarkable because Knox County is not necessarily a leader in a lot of civic realms, and the fact that we have this public defender's office that really is a national model. I mean, people come from all over the country to visit them and see what they're doing. I'd
be curious, and here's a challenge for you guys to do a story on, because when Eric was here talking about it, he threw a stat out of that's a $300,000 a year office that the data shows they save 1.7 million on the other side in legal and incarceration fees and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And I was thinking about that after the fact. It's like he also said that they have 20 something attorneys that work there.
Yeah.
And I was doing the math, and that's 10 grand an attorney a year in salary.
Well, because a lot of their funding comes from the state. So
Okay, so that's okay. So okay,
there's both local and state money that goes into
all right.
it.
So that's a little bit of it was a little bit of a sideways statistic that he kind of was putting out.
Maybe it was costing the city.
Right. Well, I mean,
the county.
right.
Yeah,
He's,
county, yes.
I mean,
in
I'm
terms
not,
of local money.
right. It's not a wrong stat. It's just a little bit, it's a little bit misleading because with whatever the state's kicking in too, but still it's county money versus county money. So I get it. I just like on the surface of it, I was like, man, that's a lot of cheap people working for you because that's not
No,
counting.
I mean, I think I don't remember what their average attorney salary is, but they're up somewhere north of 50, 60,000.
Right.
They're not super high paid as far as attorneys go, but right, you still have to pay them.
Yeah. So I thought those are probably Sharif and Eric were probably my favorite interviews so far, just because I was so excited to learn more about that office. Like as soon as they started talking about the office, like, because I don't care about you as a person. I don't want to know your platform and what you're going to change or any of that stuff. Just tell me more about how this thing works. It's so cool. So I know that I had Gina Oster on. She was my first ever. That was an awkward interview, to be honest, because that's my first real interview with a real person. But she was real nice. She was really down to earth.
Interesting race. That primary is.
Yeah, I'm kind of pissed about it because I was supposed to have Eddie Manis in this past Wednesday, and he had to reschedule on me. And now having you here, I would really like to have both, having talked to Gina and having talked to Eddie, and then talking about it. Because I mean, the thing with Eddie Manis, and this might have been where you're going. I apologize for interrupting, but the thing with Eddie Manis is everybody's arguing about. Like, I got a mailer in the mail today talking about he's not really a Republican. Like it was in my mailbox this afternoon when I checked my mail, and I was like, it's a good thing that didn't get here Tuesday. If he had come Wednesday, so I could talk to him.
Eddie, who I used to work with when I was at the city, he's in a bit of an awkward position there, and he was also when he ran for mayor of Knoxville last year, which is that he is a Republican traditionally. I mean, he grew up as a Republican. Most of his, if you look at candidates he's supported and given donations to, they're mostly, although not universally, Republicans. He calls himself a Republican. But, when he ran for city mayor, he kind of, and of course that was a nonpartisan office, so he didn't have to declare a party, but he kind of downplayed being a Republican because he knew that the city overall leans more Democratic, and that wasn't really going to help him to be identified as a Republican. But I think that it hurt him in some ways because there were Republicans who did not come out to support him because they kind of felt like, well, he's not really a Republican.
Right.
I don't know I don't know if he would have been better off to kind of more explicitly embrace more progressive issues. I'm not sure that his messaging in the mayor's race ever really got clarified.
Right. Lose is who you are, or sell out, or really sell out.
But now he's sort of got the opposite problem, which is he's in this Republican, very partisan primary and having to prove. He had to prove that he was a Republican just to get on the ballot. The county party tried to stop him from getting on the ballot.
Right. I heard it went to state level and the state gave
the
permission.
district that he's running in is among the more, it has been traditionally Republican, but the last time Martin Daniel ran for re-election, he won very narrowly against Democrat Greg McKay.
Yeah, and that's my district. So these are my people.
Right. And and there's a very well-funded Democratic candidate in that race, Virginia Couch.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like if Gina Oster wins the primary, which she may do because Republicans feel like she's more of a Republican, I don't know that she won't be in a weaker position going into the general than Eddie would be.
Right.
Because the district it is Republican, but it's not super Republican.
Right.
And Virginia Couch, who works for the Trust Company, which is owned by Sharon Price, who's a very prominent and well-known Republican in West Knoxville, she could easily draw some crossover Republican support if there are Republicans who don't, who feel like the Republican candidate is kind of too far out.
Right.
So
and that's
an interesting race.
Right. And that was the thing I asked when I was talking to Gina. I was like, because again, to give a quick mini backstory, is we talk a lot about like not understanding how the process works. And so one of the things I was asking Gina about, I was like, so how's it work? Like, you say you're Republican and that's enough, or is there more to it? And she was kind of going into it because it like, I don't know if she's doing this intentionally or not. And that's kind of why I asked the question. Is her imaging is very Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's her doings or if that's the Republican Party's doing, especially with the Eddie Manis situation kind of infringing on his little middle ground that we were just talking about. And so like I was like, so is it like, you know, you're running as Republican, they check you off, and then when the GOP gets behind you and does stuff, they build your website on the Trump model? Or like I was kind of trying to hint at those kind of questions and never really got a strong answer. But like I thought that was a very, like, I mean, I don't know. I just she's we on the show are big anti Marsha Blackburns because she was a Trump trainer, and we're not a big fan of that as a position. Like I've been trying to get Haggerty in here. I've talked to his office, and he's too busy for us, and I understand that. But like I'm curious, and the premise is like I don't know if I would if I were trying to run. I don't know if I would run on I'm the local version of Trump. I don't know how much that would sell realistically.
Well, I mean, conventional wisdom in Republican circles in Tennessee right now is basically Republican voters love Trump. And so your best bet, and you see this over and over again in Republican primaries. You saw it in the Marsha Blackburn primary, in the governor's race a couple of years ago. Kind of all of the Republican candidates trying to outdo themselves being the most pro-Trump they can because, again, you know, conventional wisdom basically lasts exactly as long as it works.
Right.
And so right now in every Republican primary, definitely in Tennessee, definitely in the South, and really in a lot of the country, you know, you're playing to the base, and the base loves Trump.
Right.
There's no question that the Republican base loves Trump, and those are your voters in a Republican primary. But that will be true for exactly as long as it wins elections for people.
Right.
And as soon as it stops winning elections, then, you know, the conventional wisdom will go another direction.
Right. All right. So in the email I mentioned to you, I wanted you to give me a little bit of your personal history, and maybe not personal, but like how you got to be, like, what is the website? Like, what is the point? How did you get to that? Just tell us a little bit about that, how you got there, and then what you see that moving forward to. I'm going to go check on my kid real quick because he keeps popping in the room on me too. Mine's not old enough to just get shooed away like yours is. And Sam is here, so you're going to be talking to the wall, but Sam will talk back to you too.
That's fine, sure, no problem.
But I'll go back and listen to this because I do want to know it, but I got to go check on this one kid.
Yeah, well, so the website, first of all, is compassknox.com. The publication is called Compass, and it's just a two-man operation. It's me and my friend and colleague Scott Barker. Hey Sam, how's it going? And we're both veteran reporters. I have about 25 years experience in journalism. Scott has something similar. And we both at various points in the past worked for the News Sentinel. I used to work for Metropulse, which was the alternative weekly here in town for many years. Sadly, got shut down about 6 or 7 years ago. And so we came out of traditional journalism backgrounds. And like everybody of our generation, I guess, in journalism, we've seen a lot of those, you know, the journalistic establishments have just kind of crumbled under everybody's feet, mostly because the internet took all the advertising away.
Exactly.
There's a little bit of a false narrative out there that the problem that journalism has is, everybody wants everything, you know, they started putting everything up for free on the internet and nobody wants to pay for it anymore. And there's some truth to that. But the reality is that subscribers and newsstand purchases never really generated much money for newspapers. Most money came from advertising.
Exactly.
And so the real impact that the internet has had is it took all the advertising away. People are just not advertising in print newspapers anymore. And if you want to advertise online, you're much more likely to do it with Google or Facebook or somebody than with like the local newspaper website. So that's kind of what's happened there. I left journalism in 2011 to go work for the city of Knoxville for former city mayor Madeline Rogero. and worked for her for about 6 years as her communications director, which was great, interesting experience. But during that time, I kind of saw the ongoing, local news kind of started to fall apart. When I first started working for the city in 2012, when we had a press conference or there was a city council meeting or whatever, there would be reporters there. And then over time, there started to just be fewer and fewer reporters. There were all sorts of important things either not being covered at all or being covered very superficially. And the impact of that I saw from when I was working for the city was that it got very hard for people in the public to understand what was happening around them.
Right. So,
and
so like, this is a joke question, but it's a real question. And I tried to research it on my own. Like, there's nothing to press credentials, right? You just say I'm at the press and you basically give them your business card and they choose whether or not.
There is no, we do not have, professional. I mean, like I have a degree in journalism, which is good, I guess. What it really, the most valuable thing I got out of my college experience was I worked at my college newspaper for 4 years.
Right.
My classes were great. I had good professors and everything, but journalism is 100% something that you learn by doing, and that's always been the case.
Right.
And so, it is a profession, but it's not something that there's any particular credentials for.
Because you always talk about, like, you always see people talk about, like, I have my press pass, and it's like, well, what do you do to get a press pass? You tell them you're at the press, and if they believe you, they give you a pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it.
Press passes, I mean, there is a difference. Like, if you show up with a press pass that says New York Times on it, you're going to get treated differently than if you have one that says
Almost in Agreement. That's fine. It doesn't hurt my
feelings. Joe's blog or whatever. But neither one of them carries any more actual legal weight or anything. It's
right.
Just, right. This is where you happen to work.
Right. Because I mean, because I think you and I are like, I know I stepped out for a second, but what you were talking about was kind of where I'm at with reaching out to these people to talk to them, because like what tiny little bit we get from like Channel 10 is real quick, real fast in passing. And the few times they do kind of focus on local politics, it's so painfully boring. Like, I try to watch
yes. And I hate that, because there are certain things about local government and politics that are always going to be boring, because, if you want to understand how like tax increment financing works, there's no way to do that without spending some time with boring stuff.
Right.
But it actually has fairly significant and non-boring implications for your city and your community,
right.
Because the things that come out of all of those boring things government do actually shape, the city and county that you live in. And that was why we started Compass, because I was working at the city and kind of saw this growing void of information. Scott had been laid off from the News Sentinel in one of their many, rounds of cuts, which continue. And we just thought, there are people out there who want to know what's going on. Yeah. And they don't have good ways to find it out. And so kind of our hypothesis was, if we just kind of, do what we know how to do. And also we had the advantage of we'd both worked here in Knoxville for a couple of decades, and we knew a lot of people, we knew the background of issues. We thought that we could put something together that people might be willing to pay for. And fortunately, that's turned out to be true. We're a niche publication, and the right. niche is people who are interested in what's going on in their community, in their local government, business, and education. Those are basically the realms that we mostly cover.
Well, we as a show will be a subscriber. I haven't gotten to do it yet because we haven't got all the financials and the bank account in place because we're new, but I intend to be a subscriber to it. And I'm curious about that. And
we love all of our subscribers.
But I'm curious about, like, Saban mentioned, and I might have missed this while I was gone, that he thought you had been with MetroPulse at one point, or?
He mentioned it,
yeah, I was.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here.
I worked for the News Sentinel in sort of the mid '90s, and then left the News Sentinel to go to MetroPulse, and I was managing editor. I was the editor, and then I actually left Knoxville and went to New York for about 7 years, and actually worked for the New York Times as a copy editor. Came back to Knoxville, landed back at MetroPulse. and was there for a few years before I went to work for the city. And part of the reason I left MetroPulse the second time was I knew it was going to be shut down, because at that point it was owned by the News Sentinel, and there was no way that the News Sentinel was going to keep MetroPulse in operation. I just didn't.
Right. You didn't want to go down with the ship.
Yeah, I was trying to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I felt bad. Like I literally felt like I was deserting a sinking ship. But a couple of years after I left, it did in fact get shut down. And
so on that, like, I guess what's curious to me in the business conversation is what made you guys decide to go with the pay model as opposed to an ad model?
Basically, because advertising is the area that has gotten the most difficult to sustain for all media, because
right.
It's very hard to compete with Google ads. It's very hard to compete with Facebook. And if you look at what has happened to the people who are still trying to, be ad revenue based, the News Sentinel being one example, people call it clickbait, but there's a reason. And that's because that's the only way they can make money.
Right.
Is, you get X number of clicks per story, per view, you get, 50 cents per view or whatever. The only real way to make money advertising online is to do mass volume, which is why Google makes a gazillion dollars doing it, and most people make very, very little.
Right.
And also, we're reporters, we're not salespeople, so we didn't want to spend all of our time trying to drum up advertising. We basically thought of it as kind of doing a farmer's market approach to journalism, which is like we show up, we set up our little booth. We've got some journalism here. If you're interested in it, come by and pay us for it.
Right.
Just like you pay for anything else that you want. And, we're up to around a little over 1,200 subscribers right now, which is good. I mean, that already is sustainable in terms of the revenue that it gives us, but obviously we would like that to be a lot more.
Right.
If we could double, triple, quadruple that, then we could get into a position where we could start having other people too, which would
right.
be great, both for our sort of like sanity and work-life balance, but also just let us cover more things.
Right.
Because we can only do so much. Like we do a fair amount for two. I think we do a lot for two people, but still, two people can only do so much. So there are certain stories we either can't do or it takes us a while to get to, and so forth. But I think people are willing to pay for it. I think there's this myth that people won't pay for news anymore because they want everything to be free. And I just don't think that's true. I think we deliberately kind of positioned ourselves as this monthly subscription model, like Netflix or whatever else. It's like you pay your $10 a month to Netflix so you can watch TV, and you pay $10 a month to us so that you can know what's going on in the community. Like
right.
there's a niche in there.
Right. And like I'm totally on board with the idea of both sides of that, because my gut reaction is I don't want to pay. But then it's right. but I want to know things that I'm not finding anywhere else. And so if the ad-based model is not giving me the information that I want, and I believe that it's here, it's worth at least $12 just to check it out for a month. And if it doesn't do what I want, then I bounce and continue not knowing anything, because there doesn't seem to be anywhere else to get that information unless you have somebody better to talk to in the process. So I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's great. I think that's one of the things that's absolutely missing, like locally. And I think the attitude is what's missing in the grander scheme of things, is that attitude of desire for better information. I think most people.
Well, the thing is, I think people want information. So where I saw it happen, and this was one of the things that made me want to start Compass, was a couple of years ago, this was before we started it, there was a big fight over the school budget. And there were these proposals to cut Project Grad and magnet programs, and things that people really valued and wanted. There's a lot of outrage in the community, and nobody could understand what was going on. Like, why were they proposing to cut these things? And Facebook was full of a zillion conspiracy theories, and the particular politics of that were complicated, and they confused people. People had a hard time knowing who the sort of like good guys and bad guys were, depending on their point of view. And I just thought, there needs to be, even if it's only because, we have 1,200 subscribers, right? But so those people are the people who are the most interested in what's going on. And so that's 1,200 people at least every day who are getting information, who can then convey that information to other people. Now, I would love for all of those other people they convey that information to also be subscribers. But the more important thing is the information's getting out there.
Right.
Like there is at least a base and a source of information that can be shared. And we make a lot of our stuff free too. Like as soon as all the coronavirus stuff started happening, we just decided, like most news organizations, like we're just going to make all of this free because it's important information. People want to know what's going on. So all of our coronavirus coverage has been free. When we come up to elections, we typically move all of our election coverage outside the paywall just to kind of let people know what's going on.
Right.
And the interesting thing to me has been that when we do that, when we make things free, it doesn't in any way, in fact, it actually helps our subscriptions. Right. Because people are more likely to read it, and then some small percentage of those people who read it then come and subscribe.
It's a good sales. It's what is that? I'm trying to think of one. They do it in other things. I'm blanking out on the phrase.
Loss leader.
Yeah, just throw it out there, and then it's like a good drug dealer. You got to throw it out there, get a couple people hooked.
Right.
They might not all stick to it,
exactly.
right? Cause the terribly accurate but terrible example nonetheless.
And one thing I do want to say about our business that I have found interesting, because there's basically two parts to it. There's our website, which has our news stories on it, which are kind of like your conventional, traditional. We go out, we interview people, we write 1,000 to 2,000 word stories, and that's there, and you can read them. And we have 1 to 2, sometimes 3 news stories per weekday up on the website. But we also send out an email that only goes to subscribers. And the email, which is also every weekday, has links to whatever's new on the website, and then also kind of a roundup of other stuff, short things that aren't worth a whole story on their own, or links to other interesting things, in the other local media or whatever. And that email is actually our key product. Like That is the thing. We have very high open rates on the email. Way more people read the email than ever click through to anything on the website. Because the email you can read in about 5 minutes. And what we have found is that even for the people who are really interested in this stuff, for a lot of them, like that's, 5 minutes in the morning, like that's great. You feel like you know a little bit about what's going on. And then you can click through to the links for for the specific things that really interest you. But, I think because if we were just doing the website and throwing news stories up there, I think there would be a lot less traction.
Right.
What people like is this kind of like, personalized thing that shows up in their inbox every morning and gives them a very quick, brief rundown of kind of the news of the day. And that we thought that the email would be important, but it's actually turned out to be way more important than we thought. Like, I really think it's the thing that drives the whole enterprise, really.
It's interesting. It makes total sense. I think I would be, when we get subscribed, when I get that email in the morning, I'll be like, okay. Oh, this one's something that I've been, it's something that we talked about on the show. I want to get some more in depth on it because this is probably one of my only sources to get more in depth on it. And I don't know. Okay, so let's jump back where we started because I kind of pushed off to run a distraction to go distract my kid for a second. The state rep seat with Eddie Manis and Virginia Couch and Gina Oster is going to be an interesting one. I follow what you're saying as far as Manis will probably beat Virginia, but Gina might be too far. So if Gina wins the primary,
I think the general election is going to be close regardless of the candidate. My guess would be that Eddie would probably perform a bit better in the general election than Gina Oster would. But these are all. It's a little hard to say. I do think if you like Democratic turnout in Knox County this year is very high. Mm-hmm. We saw that in the March primaries, which was of course driven by the Democratic presidential primary. But even Democrats are really outpacing Republicans in terms of requesting absentee ballots, for example, in this upcoming election.
Because I guess you have to declare to get your primary part on. That makes sense.
Right, exactly.
I was going to ask, how do they know that? And then I realized as soon as I started talking.
You have to request either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. Or you can get an independent ballot, but that's not going to give you very much.
Right.
There's only a couple of races.
Right, which is why I haven't – that's for me, that's why I haven't bothered changing. I've been a registered Republican since I was 18. Probably 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I voted for Gary Johnson last time around. I would count myself
So
as
did Eddie Manis, by the way.
well. Good. Then that'll be something fun to talk to him if I can get him in here.
Yeah, he has made a point. Although this is one of the things that some Republicans don't like about him, is that he's been public about saying that he didn't support and he doesn't support
And
President Trump.
and me as a very lightly informed strategist looking at it, I don't think if I was running right now, I'd run on the Trump coattails. I don't think it makes. I get what you're saying as far as the status quo or whatever, but I mean, I just don't. I don't think that's a winning ideal right now. I mean, I've made a bet that looks like I'm probably going to lose with one of the other guys on the show that Trump's going to win again. I still think I got a chance. I don't feel as strongly about it. I mean, it's just like I made this joke and I didn't mean to. I felt kind of terrible in hindsight when Courtney was Skyping in or zooming in and we were talking and stuff. No, I take that back. I'm sorry. It was when Grant was here, same day, kind of runs together. I was like, I could fart a better candidate than we've got for president right now. This is the worst shit show of two presidential candidates that I can think of, at least in my lifetime. It's just it's awful. I mean, I don't understand what's going on I don't understand what's going on in the Biden camp. Is the Democratic primary this weekend? Is that going on right now? When's the Democratic primary? Like, not the primary, but the
convention.
The convention, is that this weekend?
No, I can't remember the dates of it. They moved it back. I think they pushed it to like September.
Okay, I was going to say that's the point, is that it's such a non-issue right now that we don't know when it is. Like,
well, and there's definitely, I mean, and of course, like we don't cover a lot of national politics for a reason, because it's one of those things that like everybody just wants to argue about it.
Right.
But I do think that there's an interesting disconnect between, on the one hand, you have, I think, a very energized Democratic electorate, but they're not energized about the presidential candidate.
Right.
They're energized about getting Trump out of office.
Right.
But
right.
I don't think you're going to find many Democrats who are actually excited about Joe Biden. I mean, that's just not. Yeah. It's not something that you hear.
Right. Know? It's phenomenal. Like, and even in the primaries before we had all the COVID stuff going on, it's just like, it was his to lose from the get go, and like, I couldn't wrap my head around that was the president elect, for lack of a better word, or at least the nominee elect from day one, and it's like, I think I read in one story there's 300 and something official candidates the Democrats put up for president. And then when actually stuff started happening, it was like 26 or whatever. We had those 2-night debates where it was.
There were too many. That was one of their problems.
Right.
If they'd started out with a smaller field, they might have had a better chance of ending up with somebody different.
But it so quickly went into at least to stay on national for just a second. Like, it so quickly went in the Democratic primary of a centrist to a super left, and it was a two-party within the party battle, and it was just like, I don't understand what's going on here. Like, there's nobody who has any.
Well, I had a theory about Biden that I don't know if I mean, there's a zillion theories out there.
Make it good. Make it like Bill Gates good. A lot of
it just came. People thought that there was this whole like, oh, it's the establishment versus the left and whatever, and that's definitely true for some number of engaged voters, ideologically engaged voters. There are a lot of voters who are not super ideological.
Right.
Who mostly vote on people who they know or they like or just kind of have a good feeling about or whatever. And I think that Joe Biden was just sort of like first of all, he was the most famous person running. Like, he was the one who everybody came in knowing his name.
True.
Because he'd been around forever and he was Obama's right-hand guy and so forth. And also, I just think that people, like, there was a comfort level there. It was kind of like the known brand. And I'm not even sure it had so much to do with him being more centrist and Bernie being more left or whatever. It's just like, people knew him, they were comfortable with him, and they figured he would be okay. I mean,
right.
I think a lot of it, I think people tend to think that voters are more ideological than they are, and not that many voters are actually super ideological.
Right, and I think that's, I think for me, at least on the grand scheme of the show, is that I think I fully agree with that. Like, I sit, especially in national media, local media just lacks existence. National media is that super partisan mess, and it's like, I don't hear me anywhere in this. And I would argue that, I don't know, 75-80% of the national populace falls under that category, that none of us are this hard left or this hard right and all this argument about what's going on. And so it was pretty. I don't know. It's just that primary and then this presidential race in the middle of the coronavirus thing. It's gotten extra crazy this time around.
Well, and it's one reason, honestly, that I like local politics because it tends to be less ideological. I mean, you will get people who kind of drag ideological issues in, but a lot of it's more pragmatic. And I think the questions in local politics are really interesting. Like, Knox County is a fairly rapidly growing county. How do we deal with that?
Right.
Because
that's something that I've gotten hot on an idea of, and Kyle Ward was in here, and we were just talking about stuff, and I've thought about it before, but never really in depth, and I just kind of threw it out there about why aren't we pushing towards Metro? Like I feel like it's a reality whether we want it to be or not, unless there's some true interest that the county has and the city both have into trying to keep Knoxville smaller than it's looking like it's going to be. Why aren't we pushing towards Metro? And I talked to Grant about it too. I try to make it a point to on specific things to bring it up with everybody when I talk to him, and that's what I've talked to everybody about. And when I was talking to Grant about it, he's like, I get what you're saying, and if you look at it, if you really get down into the nuts and bolts of what's going on, a lot of this stuff is divided already between county and city in a way so that they're not overlapping. So he's like, a lot of the savings that you think are going to be there aren't there. And okay, and I left it at that, and I was thinking about it afterwards. I was like, but it would be some savings, right?
Yes, and there would be, because even if you look at, so Nashville is the only real metro government that we have in Tennessee, Metro Nashville, Davidson County, and they just had to pass a giant tax increase because their budget's in bad shape because they've run up a huge amount of debt building all of their stadiums and convention centers and everything else they've done. But the interesting thing is, even after their giant tax increase, if you look at it, people in Nashville are paying lower taxes than people who live in Knoxville, because those of us who live in the city pay both city and county property taxes, and our combined property taxes are higher than in Metro Nashville. And there's definitely efficiency that comes with that kind of government. And the other thing is, Nashville still has a division between people who live closer in pay a higher property tax rate. It's the urban services district. There are certain things there's public transit and some other things that are concentrated in more in the core areas. So they pay a little bit more for it. And that would probably be the last time Metro government was proposed in Knoxville. That was which was going on 25 years ago. That was envisioned here too. The problem that I think Knox County has right now, I think it's less likely that Knox County and Knoxville would approve Metro government now than the last time they voted, because the city and county have gotten farther apart politically. The city has become more blue. The areas outside the city have become more red. Everything's gotten more polarized.
Right. And that was what was interesting. And I was talking to the different people about it, is like, Kyle Ward was talking about it, and he's like, there's no way the city's going to give up. He's like, the easy way to do it, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but he's like, the easy way to do it is the city just, turns in their charter and ceases to exist, and Knox County government just takes over the whole thing. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And he's like, but there's no way the city's going to do that. It's like, well, yeah, I get that. I wouldn't fire myself either. That doesn't make sense. But but then he goes on to say, the city's more Democratic, the county's more Republican, and so the Democratic city office holders aren't going to give up that to Republicans. And then
and it's not just that; it's the actual voters. Like, I think that when it's been put to votes in the past, traditionally what happened was, because it had to pass both within the city and outside the city. And traditionally in past votes, people inside the city voted for it. People outside the city voted against it, because at that time, there was still the population was still larger inside the city than outside the city. Now we're in an opposite position. 60% of the population of the county lives outside the city, including people in Farragut, which of course is its own incorporated town.
Yeah, we're not going down that road.
But voters in the city, I think right now would not want to dissolve their own government and just have essentially Knox County government, which is very, very Republican. And so I don't think, I think if you ran that election now, it would fail both places.
Okay, so
I don't think it would pass either inside the city or outside the city.
so since you have the knowledge of the history, it was a ballot item or it was in commission
Yeah.
and council?
No, no, it had to be voted on because it would actually be, you would be changing the charter of both the city and the county. And to do that, you need a vote.
Right. Because I'm curious to run the premise of what it would take to try to put it on. Because I'd be curious to know. Like, I mean, I believe you wholeheartedly because you know way better than me. But I'd be curious to know what would happen if it was on a ballot. Like, I'd be curious to actually see it in print that this is what happened. Because I think, I think it's, I don't know, and maybe it's the details of how it will shake down that would be the big difference in it to me. And, I mean, obviously there'll be a transition period until the next election, or it would go into place when an election. I don't know exactly how you would set up the format of the change, but like, I mean, I just think it's a reality. Like, I'm county by a fence and 2 houses. I mean, and so I get all the services of the city except for trash pickup and fire, which is a whole nother thing that I have a bunch of issues with. I'm not a big rural metro fan as a whole, but and again, I argue as a libertarian, so I'm not a big fan of state-run fire department and stuff like that either. So it's a weird spot for me. I'm just like, it's just a curiosity to me. And even if it's in a $1 billion budget that county runs, I don't know what the city's budget is because I haven't talked to that many people that are city people currently. I don't know what the city's budget is on top of that $1 billion.
About 340 million. The big difference there is the schools. The county includes the school system
and the prison.
The schools are about $500 million by themselves.
Right.
They make up about 60% of the county budget.
All right, and then the prison and all the court system runs through the county too, except for some of the small like parking tickets and stuff like that go through the city courts.
City court only handles exactly, parking tickets, speeding tickets, and so forth.
And so that's what I mean. I don't know. I'm curious about that's a ballpark, what, like 1.2, 1.3 billion dollars that is collected in this, what to me is a municipality. We're all we're all close enough at this point. It's like you said, 60% of the population is outside of the city limits, and probably
the other major revenue source there besides property tax is sales tax. And even people who live outside the city spend most of their sales tax money inside the city because that's where most of the businesses are.
Right, and that's
75% of the sales taxes generated in Knox County are inside city limits.
And my business is in city limits, which I don't really understand how that got into city limits. And then we're about to open a second store that's going to be in city limits, but I live in county, and all the taxes I collect for my businesses go into services that aren't technically for me as a county resident.
Right.
Because it goes from where the taxes are collected, not who's paying it. I don't ask people if they're county residents.
Now, the one thing with sales taxes is like 3/4 of them go to the schools, no matter where they're collected.
Right.
So the school system gets its cut regardless. But then, the other 27 or so percent.
Right, but at that point, when they're combined, so that's both of them. So even the city taxes kick back 60%.
Yes.
Okay.
72% of both city and county sales taxes go to the school system.
But I mean, either way, if you combine the two,
Farragut only gives 50% of their sales taxes to the school system.
Yeah, well, because those parents kick in plenty anyway. But
yes, right, they pay for their own. Yeah.
But I mean, you think about it. If we combine the two budgets, we're in the 1.3 billion, and now it's not 60% anymore. It's half the budget is schools, and so I mean, after talking to Courtney as a teacher and trying to figure out what I'm doing as a parent, going into schools, coming back, and all this stuff, and it's always a discussion that the schools don't have enough money. Well, I don't know how the rest of the county would operate, but if 60% of the $1.2 billion budget is going to schools instead of 60% of the $100 billion budget, that's a big difference in how much money the schools have to do what they want. So I don't know. Again, maybe that's the one of the pitches you could sell. But then you're also going to have to argue what services get lost on county level that don't exist that side. I don't know. It's really interesting to me because, again, arguing as a libertarian, I don't like any of it. But arguing as a realist who leans libertarian, I have to acknowledge things that do exist and will continue to exist, and that as much as I want to push things one way, that's as much as I'm going to get as a push. I'm not going to get a full-on. I'm not an anarchist libertarian. I'm a minarchist at best. There's got to be something in place. We can't. I mean, if anything else, this whole mask mandate thing, as much as a libertarian, I hate it. I hate it more that it had to happen, because as a libertarian, my belief says that we should do the right thing. We shouldn't be made to do the right thing. And
Yeah.
since sadly it's become clear to me that there are enough people that can't be told how to do the right thing, we have to make. And so it's like, honestly, this
There's a
pandemic.
reason that we passed seatbelt laws eventually too, and that took a long time. It took a long time to pass seatbelt laws, and it was basically years and years of saying, really, you guys should all wear your seatbelts, and people weren't doing it.
Right.
So finally, they made it a law.
Right. And so I mean, I can argue against that, but that's not the point right now. But so I don't know. I mean, again, I'm stuck on the Metro idea. I want to. So in your history and your insight, what does it take to get that as a ballot item? I mean, obviously it's too late this year. If so, what do we got? We got a 2022 election coming up. I know we have.
Yeah, I mean, you can there. I would need to look at the county charter. I know what it takes to get a city charter amendment on. I'm not sure about the county, but you need petitions with lots of signatures, basically. But I think that, and it might be possible to meet that threshold. I wouldn't personally recommend anybody devote a lot of time or resources to it right now, because I just don't think it's going to pass. Like, I think eventually there will be metro government in Knox County, but I think we're probably 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, Kyle was saying we're probably 10 years out, unless the city really screws up.
What's going to have to happen is the whole area is going to have to become basically more urbanized, which it is. I mean, that's what's happening all over the county. Before, I think, because right now there's still too much of a divide between the rural areas, the suburban areas, the urban areas, and people are kind of dug in. The county power structures are pretty powerful. So yeah, I think it's a ways off. Like, I think it will happen. It makes sense for all the reasons you're saying, but the politics of it just don't work right now.
Well, I don't accept that. That's not okay with me. Like, that's what bothers me more about it, is that it's not a. I mean, if I'm going to take any party affiliation off the table, if like the pure constitutionalist is you're supposed to work for me, not for yourselves. And if the right thing to do for me and for the majority of your citizenry is to do this, then do it. I don't, because again, like as much as different people want to say that there's not that much partisan going on here, it's like, I had Todd Fromeyer in here, and his was like, I'd be totally down with Metro if Kincaid, the
Mayor
city mayor,
Kincannon.
Sorry, I just blanked out on that. If Kincannon was the mayor on the other side, then I'd be totally down with it. But if Jacobs is the mayor, no way.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's only going to be for a couple of years until we get changed over to the next one. And once the actual voting kicks in and we have some normalcy in voting in it, then it's going to run into what the county, what's actually best for the county and the citizenry, instead of what's best for the county mayor and what's best for the city mayor playing the games of keeping their jobs. And that's just gross. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things that just kind of grosses me out. So,
yeah, well, politics is it's not a place for the idealistic.
Well, but that's the fun to fight against it as the idealist, I guess. I don't know. I'm just.
But I shouldn't say that, because, I mean, that it's easy to be cynical, and of course, I've seen lots of dubious behavior by lots of elected officials. I also know a lot of elected officials who, even if I don't necessarily agree with them all the time, I think are doing it for the right reasons, right, and are really in there trying. So, I do think there are idealistic people in the systems trying to do good things, but also, power attracts a lot of people there, and it doesn't have to be a lot of power. All of these tiny little county offices that are elected offices with their own 20 employees or whatever, every single one of them is like a little fief, a little,
right.
There's people will really fight for these things, and that is a significant factor in all of this.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I mean, and again, as a person, it makes sense to me to not, part of me, it's like, well, I'm here to do the best interest of the people, but I still have a personal investment in what I'm doing, whatever it is, and I don't want to not be here. I want to stay here. I want to keep working. I want to do the job. And maybe there's some specific thing that I really, really want to get done because I really, really think it's a good thing, and I can't do it if I'm not here. And so I'm going to fight to keep my office, even though it shouldn't necessarily exist. So I don't know. It's just it's frustrating to me. Like we argue the binary, like this binary that's everywhere all the time. AC, one of the guys, always says, he's like, there's a reason there's a right and a wrong, and there's a left and a right. Because there's one or the other. There's no middle ground anymore, or there's no middle ground in those two, period. But for the most part, in day-to-day life, I would argue to death that there's so much gray area, there's so much middle ground with so many people that right or wrong is taken away from the reality over and over and over again, and we all lose out for it, and it frustrates the crap out of me.
Well, and I think that a lot of times, there aren't good or easy answers, and this is something that, like, when I worked for the city, we would deal with issues like homelessness, and everybody was always angry at us about homelessness, and it was across the board. It was people who thought that we were doing too much, spending too much money. These people are all just junkies. You just need to, just clear them all out of there. Like, people would drive by homeless camps and get angry and call the mayor's office and so forth. Then you would have the people who, whenever you tried to enforce laws against people asking for money on the streets downtown, would get angry about that and say you're infringing on people's rights and so on and so forth. And the reality is, homelessness is a really, really complicated situation. And the public officials who are trying to deal with it are not, for the most part, badly intentioned. They legitimately want to help people, but that's a very difficult population to help. It takes a huge amount of resources, and you can spend a lot of time and money and still not make much of a dent in it.
Right.
And so it wasn't, what I would always say to people is, look, if the problem here was just that nobody cares, or that the people in power are evil, that would be an easier problem to solve. If the people in power are evil, you just vote in somebody who's good. But what if you vote in well-intentioned people who really want to solve the problems, and yet the problems are so complicated,
right, and
difficult and operate on multiple levels that you still can't actually solve them? Well, then that's a much different situation. And that's true of a lot of issues. A lot of issues, the problem is not that people are good or bad, or even that ideas are good or bad. It's just that the issues are complicated. Right.
And that is again, AC's, every time we get like neck deep in arguing about something, it's always, all right, back up. It's complicated. It's like, well, that's why we're talking about it. You can't simplify it with just the phrase that it's complicated. But I'm not saying that about you. I'm just saying, I hear you say it, and then I hear him in the back of my head, and it's like, damn it, I hate it when he's right. I don't like it when he's right.
Well, it is true. Well, that's my wife says that the epitaph on my tombstone is going to be, it's more complicated than that, because that's sort of like my default answer. But that comes from, so I've been a reporter, and I've been a reporter for 25 years, worked in government for 6 years, and all of that has persuaded me that almost everything is more complicated than it appears. And it's frustrating, but it's just the way things are.
It is indeed. And I don't know, it's just, I don't know, at least with him, I think it's a cop out every once in a while, just because he's done arguing with us about it. But I think it is, and I think there's value in people being in place and trying to help simplify it for the rest of us, which is why I'm excited about what you do. And we're trying to do our best we can, at least in our simple version of it. I think it's important to have access to at least some base level information, because we always joke about, we don't know who we're voting for. And we always joke, Max, one of the other guys, the guy that's in Mexico right now, he always jokes about, if we weren't doing this show, let me back up a second. I always comment on, if we weren't doing this show, I don't think I would even know that we have an August 6th election. I probably wouldn't have paid attention. I would have driven by the school over here by the house and been early voting today. What? What are we voting on? Who's doing what? And then I'd go in there and I'd vote R or D and then call it a day. And I think that's what probably a lot of people do. And because the information's not out there. other than federal level stuff, because you can't not see that. Other than the few mailers that you get in your mailbox from the local people, you don't not see it, and it's really hard to keep up with these complicated issues as a normal person with your own complicated life going on. And so, how does somebody like me, who's decided I want to get more involved and I want to understand better and I want to have a better impact for what I think is important, Metro, for example, I think that's important. I think it's something that needs to happen sooner than 10 years down the road, when the city overextends itself and goes bankrupt and the county takes over because by default, when it should be a decision of the county.
Well, I will say that, and again, I worked at the city, and so I have a city bias. But the city's not going to go bankrupt. The city's in perfectly fine financial shape. I hear occasionally county people in county government will talk about the city, and I think, well, look at their budget. The city's has better bond ratings than the county does right now.
Right.
And the reason for that is that the city, unlike the county, has been willing to raise taxes every 10 years. Right. The county hasn't raised property taxes in 21 years, and a consequence of that, and I'm not saying they should raise taxes, but they don't have any money. And most county discussions come down to, the number of times they say, we would like to do this, but we can't afford it. And that's a deliberate choice. They have made the choice for 21 years not to ask people to pay more. And actually, county property taxes have gone down about 33% over that 21 years.
Right.
And so,
yeah. And again, talking about complicated, is that it's gone down as a percentage, but not as a whole, because values have gone up.
Right.
Accordingly.
Yes, because they're not allowed to gain money from property. When they do reassessments and property values go up, if property values go up, they have to adjust the tax rate down.
Right.
They're not allowed to make money through reassessment.
Right.
But that's a deliberate choice. The city, on the other hand, has sort of routinely, and I imagine that India Kincannon will raise taxes sometime in her first term. Madeline Rojero did it. Bill Haslam did it. Victor Ashe raised taxes 2 or 3 times while he was mayor. The city has raised taxes, but the interesting thing about that, because I was working for the city the last time they raised taxes, and nobody said, I went with she made her budget presentation, and she said, and we're proposing a tax increase. And then I went with her the next week to 2 different neighborhood organizations to talk about the budget. One was in Sequoia Hills, very affluent, mostly Republican. One was in North Knoxville, less affluent, less Republican. In both of those places, nobody, not a single person, literally, and these were packed rooms, not a single person stood up and said, I don't want you to raise taxes. What every single person stood up and said, I love what you're doing. I just want more. I want more sidewalks. I want more greenways. I want more parks. I want more this. I want more that. I want more bike lanes. We need a traffic signal. People wanted stuff.
Right.
And as long as they were seeing that they were getting stuff for what they were paying, nobody said a word. There were 5 budget hearings that year, and not a single person showed up to say, don't raise taxes.
Right.
So I think that, people are willing to pay for things if they see that they're getting something of value from it.
And that's the bottom line for me. Is the
county would have a much harder time raising taxes because it is much more Republican, and I think there's a much stronger base there of people who are very suspicious of government, and also, in a lot of more rural areas of the county, they just don't necessarily see the need. They're like, I don't need a bus system. I don't need, all this stuff you're spending money on. I don't care. I don't go to Market Square. It doesn't do anything for me,
Right.
So I think it would be a harder lift for the county to do it.
Okay, but go ahead. Finish.
Well, no, I was just going to say, rounding back to the the sort of comparison between city and county finances. The city has more obligations, but it also has more resources, and it's the city's not going to go anywhere. I imagine, financially, the city in a lot of ways is probably better off than the county is.
Right, and likely, it's going to have to be a ballot item. It's not going to be the city screwing up, kicking them out. And so, all right. So to kind of finish up on a topic that's fun to talk about and is super complicated, and we don't do it. When I had Courtney on, we were talking about how trying to keep up with the complications of being a voter in an election and trying to figure out who you're even allowed to vote for. Is there anything I don't know if you know the history of, or like what the, like, it's so damn complicated trying to keep up with. I'm District 4 in county elections, and I'm District 18 in state rep, and then I think I'm 15 and something else, and then they got all this different, like, it's so damn complicated. Um, Obviously, it would be a super overhaul to try to change the whole thing over. But like for me, I don't know where I found it. It might have been through you guys. I was trying to find my ballot specifically for my address, and that to me is a super resource. Because as I was trying to invite guests on, I was focused on me. Some of the other guys aren't in the same locality as me, and I was trying to challenge them to find their own people. But as I was reaching out to people, I was always reaching out to people that were mine. And then Grant actually reached out to me to get on the show. And then since he reached out, I felt like I was obligated to bring Courtney on. And so the only reason I was talking to District 2 people was because Grant started it. But and those were great interviews. I had a great time with both of them. But like, is there a, I don't know, get a little conspiracy on it, I guess. Is there a point? Like, is there a reason? Like, is this a thing that's been slowly built over the years to try to keep it complicated, to try to make it confusing intentionally on the voters so they don't have the time and energy to keep up with what's in front of them, and so they just go in and they vote their R's and D's and run home?
I don't think it's been a deliberate attempt to make things complicated, but I also would say there hasn't probably been enough attempt to make it simple. And like, for example, what you're talking about, that would be a great thing for the election commission to do. And it might be something worth, there's somebody you ought to have on, actually.
That's on my agenda. Yeah. Once
the election administrator.
Yeah, I've got a couple people on my list, or not people, but a couple things to talk to on my list post-election. I'm not going to try to call him now and be like, hey, explain to me how the whole election process works.
He's a little busy right now.
3 weeks out.
But Chris is a really good guy, and he knows this stuff inside out. And that's the kind of thing, like, that would be cool for them to add to their website, where if you could just go to their website, type in your address, and see your ballot. Because you're right. People hear about all these different races, and then they get to the voting booth and they realize they can't vote in any of them.
Yeah, because that's me.
Because I'm live in that district.
Because I'm right here on the edge of the city, and so like when everybody starts placarding all their stuff everywhere, like there's 15 names on the side of the street, and like 3 of them are on a ballot, on my ballot, and the other 12 or whatever are city people, and it's like I don't know what I'm looking at, and I don't know, like I don't have enough time to research the people that I'm actually allowed to vote for, let alone research who I'm allowed to vote for, and then research them on top of that. There's so much. I don't know. I'm a lazy constituent, and
it requires a lot. I agree. To be an engaged, informed citizen actually takes a lot of work, and anything that anyone can do to make it easier will be better for everybody. And that's definitely part of what we try to do with Compass. But it's something that I think a lot of other people could help with too, and on the government side and the nonprofit side and so forth, because it's daunting for people. The reality is, especially at the local level, it's actually pretty accessible once you can kind of crack the code. Like, people will talk to you. You can go to meetings. And I tell people this all the time, and they don't believe me. I'm like, you can get 15 friends together and show up at a city council or county commission meeting to push for some issue. You will get a hearing. You might not get exactly what you want, but most people don't do that. So 15 people showing up to talk about something is more than anybody else is going to do at that meeting,
right.
And you'll get attention by virtue of that. So it is actually doable, but I think it's hard for people to just kind of even find those openings and figure out, where do I even start?
Exactly. All right. So we're going to kick you out here because you have family and better things to do than keep talking to us for another hour or so. So run through, contact anything that you want to do as far as promoting your site and what you guys do, knowing that you at least have one customer soon sitting in front of you. But all of our listeners, hopefully the local ones at least, will at least take the time to check you guys out. So give them the details on how to get there.
Sure. It's CompassKnox.com, and all of the subscription information and everything is there. And there's some free stories linked from the front page, so you can kind of see what we do. We cover local government, politics, business, and education. We cover the school system. We cover the University of Tennessee. And
oh shit! All right, sorry. That's one thing I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
How much influence do you think UT has on city and county government in getting things done?
in certain areas they can have a lot of influence. It's variable. UT is a Goliath. I mean, neither the city or county can tell UT what to do. State property is exempt from property taxes, is exempt from local zoning regulations. UT can do a lot of things without anybody's permission. Historically, there's been some tension there because of that. I think in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a real move from UT to get more engaged in the community, and those relationships between UT and the city and county are a lot better than they used to be. Randy Boyd, honestly, he's a very engaged guy in the community. He owns he and his family own half the old city. He has a lot of interests of all kinds in the city. And so I think he, both for personal and professional reasons, he wants UT to be, really deeply engaged. So I think that they're very influential. They're very important. They have however many, I forget, 10,000 or so.
I mean, they're the number one. They're the number one employee in the county, right?
Yep. Yep. And well, yes, they are. They're the number one. School system's number two. But yeah, they're a big deal in Knoxville and Knox County. And local governments, if UT shows up and says they want something, local governments will at least listen to them because UT is important.
Right.
It's very important to Knoxville.
But what pisses me off more than anything is the things they don't want, like a new, better, good Civic. I argue, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've argued to death that I think UT killed any chance we're ever going to have of having a good Civic Coliseum / auditorium.
Well, I mean, there's a conundrum there, right? Because does Knoxville really need two big, two 10, 20,000 seat venues? Probably not. And so that is.
But I mean,
there's some challenges there.
But it would be, I mean, if the Civic's doing it, there's income involved. Where there's city county income involved. Where if UT's doing it, we don't get the city county doesn't get the income.
Right. The one thing you get is sales taxes from. I mean, everybody benefits now that they're selling beer on campus.
For sure,
that's been good for everybody.
Well, no, everybody that is in a bar right next to it, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, the Strip is getting gross. It's getting bad down there.
Well, and also, I mean, the Strip. This is actually a story I want to do because if you think about, I mean, theoretically, students are going to come back next month. We'll see how all that goes. But all of those businesses down on the Strip have been sitting there with no customers.
Right.
For 5 months.
Right.
5 months.
My wife works down there. She's actually at work down there right now. And she's I mean, I don't know how much, I'm sure you've heard about it. There's been last night there was a shooting down there.
I didn't hear about last night. I heard about the guy who fired like 30 rounds last weekend.
Right. And
right in the middle of Cumberland Avenue.
Yeah. She was there for that too. And so there's been conversations in our household of her leaving that job for what's going on down there right now.
Well, and what hurt the Strip, sort of sadly, was the rejuvenation of downtown. The Strip did best when downtown was dead.
Yep, that's when I worked down there.
Downtown came back, which has been great overall for the city to have an active downtown. But I think that a lot of students even started going downtown to go to stuff, and that hurt everybody on.
Well, I think that the project they're doing right now, I mean, it looks nice. But like the incentives that they're putting in place for these developers to build those multi-function buildings, it's just going to turn it so generic. You can do that anywhere. It's going to be. I mean, Cumberland is going to turn into whatever main street near some campus anywhere else in the country, and it just grosses me out. Like, it disappoints me. I grew up on the campus as far as work goes. Like I worked at that O'Charlie's. I shut down that O'Charlie's when I worked there.
Right.
And then I went back there with another business later and stuff like that. And like there was a feel down there that is completely getting taken apart. And there was a uniqueness this is not just some set of nightlife in some city. This is Knoxville's set of nightlife, and it is absolutely falling apart. And I agree that downtown and Old City getting back better is part of that. And so we still have that in town. But I don't know. I mean, like, as a parent, I wouldn't want to put my kids anywhere near. I'd be like, no, you go party downtown. Stay away from it.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want you to party at all because I'm a parent.
I'd rather go downtown. I mean, I don't even. I can't tell you the last time I actually went down to I think the late 90s was the last time that I was going down to the Strip for anything much.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I don't know. We appreciate you. We hope we can get you back on as often as possible. This was
sure, yeah.
uber
Give me a
informative,
shout.
fun,
I'm sure I speak for a lot of people. We definitely miss the Metro Pulse.
Thanks. I miss it too.
All right, man. Well, you have a great night. We appreciate you coming on. We're going to continue arguing about some other stupid stuff, I'm sure. But I don't know what else to say.
Hey, so tell me where can people listen to this, because I'll throw a link in the newsletter.
I appreciate it. We are. It's Almost an Agreement. We're on most major podcast networks. We've got a Facebook page, Almost an Agreement, and we got a Twitter page, Almost an Agreement. I started following you guys on there and put a tag in to try to build some reciprocity or whatever. But Almost an Agreement at gmail.com if you want to hit us up directly. We're trying to, as best we can, to get as many local candidates in here as we can to actually talk to them personally. We really want to, like I said, we sit and argue plenty. Like this podcast goes back like 10 years of us just yelling at each other when we're hanging out. And I can't count the number of times in that span that we go, local government's more important, local government's more important, local government's more important. And then we all just sit there and don't know what we're doing on local elections. And it's like, well, fuck, let's do it. Let's figure it out.
Right.
Let's start digging into it and let's be more
I
active in it.
respect it because, not enough people pay attention to it. And so.
Right. And we're hoping in our very B-rated version of how we act as adults that echoes, that hits people right, that they actually listen to it instead of just, like I said, like the local media version, it sucks. I mean, it just sucks. Like I really try. I'll get up tomorrow and I'll turn it on, and I'll try to watch was it Channel 6 or Channel 10 does their weekend local politics thing, and it's always Massey and one other person and whatever, and it's so painful to watch. It's just like, I don't know what you're talking about, and maybe it's going to get better as I'm getting more involved. But it's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and what you're talking about seems so foreign. So bring it back to reality. Talk to people about how this actually hits their lives instead of just, oh, well, we voted on this thing. Well, what is this thing? What's going on with that thing?
Right.
Where did it come from? Is there a need for it? Like, there's no questions on the journalist side for that matter. It's just like, oh, just do what you want to do. This is your stage for this next half hour.
Yeah,
and you just
I used to go on the Channel 6 show sometimes, and my frustration with it always was that it was mostly about people spouting off their opinions. And, I mean, it's not that I don't have opinions. I have tons of opinions, but I'm a reporter, and I feel like the most important thing I can do is tell people what's going on, like what the information is.
Exactly.
What I think about it or who I think should win isn't really the point.
Right. And yeah, that's what's absolutely lacking in the general media right now. It's and even if it's supposed to be like built as a, this is what's happening. There's so much slant all the time. There's so much, if it's Fox News writing it, or if it's MSNBC or CNN or whatever, it's so painfully obvious that they're so sided on it. It's like, well, all right, I'm trying to take apart what you're saying to actually hear what's the facts are of what you're putting out, because you're putting the hard slant on it. But all right, I'm going to quit talking at you because I'll keep going for the other hour that I said that you didn't have to be here for if you didn't want to. So we thank you so much. I'll email you. And like I said, I'd like to have you on plenty. Especially as this election start, as this election hits, I really want to do a post show. I've talked to all the candidates. I want to have them come on and do a post show. I want to know more about from the candidates how the process was for them, like if it was fun or not and all that kind of stuff. But again, thank you so much. Have a great night, and I will email you soon.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
buddy. Boo. Cool. That was fun.
That was awesome.
That was great. I mean, he's a down to earth fun guy. It'll be crazy if we get him in here with everybody.
It's crazy to put I get to see put a face to the name, unlike our listeners. But
right.
Saw his name for many years in,
And we
in
could.
the Metro Pulse.
I can do it I can put it on the YouTube, that actual video.
That's true.
It takes like 4 hours. I don't know what the deal is with YouTube. I've tried, I tried to do a test. I was trying to do a little ad bumper of that video that I sent a while ago. All the little pictures that kind of cascaded.
Oh yeah.
With the new theme song on it.
Yeah, I didn't like that collage.
Whatever. I'm trying to do something, because one of the things I was trying to do is I was trying to get something on Facebook that we could add if we wanted to do it as an ad.
Right.
Because a 2-hour podcast that has one picture, it's not, you can't boost it.
Yeah, but when most people are listening to it, they're not looking at their phone. They've got it in their pocket and they're just listening to it.
Right, but you're not. But when you're scrolling through Facebook, You want something that catches your attention. You pause on it, and then
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I'm trying to build some clickbait.
I'm thinking about it from listening to it from a podcast perspective.
Right. No. And what's funny is like of our however many total, like we have like 7 listens on Facebook. And I don't know where, I don't know what the metric is on when it counts it as a listen, because like the different.
Yeah, some of you got to go all the way to the end or at least half.
Right. So I mean, yeah. And so like I can't. I mean, I'll go through on our page just kind of working on stuff, and I'll start one, and it's like I go 15 seconds. But I try. It's fun.
I've done that. But I definitely miss the Metro Pulse. I really wish we had another periodical like the Metro Pulse. It was great weekly. Found out what was going on in town, all the good shows, good music, great articles.
I'll pre-argue the other side of it is they were so damn expensive to advertise on.
Yeah.
Like I looked into it a couple different times. Like
And that's kind of what he was saying. It all came down to, that was the way to make money. That was the only way to make money was the ads in there.
right, and I mean, that'd be a fun like specific conversation to have with him about how much it costs to operate it.
Because I know Barley's normally had like a full 1 page
Yeah.
and then like a kind of half page in the back that had all the listings of their music for that week.
Yeah, and then with the the curiosity would be, and I guess Metropulse is more like culture, what's going on in town kind of stuff.
I mean, newspapers have gone that. If you've seen them, a couple pages, I've flipped through and it's a whole entire newspaper page. And it looks like it's a news article. When you look at it, it's actually like an advertised news article.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they do on, you click through on stuff on Facebook,
Right.
and you, read the story, and then as you get to the bottom, I mean, not even Facebook, like WBRR, you go on their webpage, and you read a story, and as you're reading, there's a bunch of ads in the middle of it, and as you get to the bottom, there's, a picture and a headline, and it's like, oh, here's a story about this, and it's like, well, no, that's an ad by, some dick pill or whatever.
Right.
Which is may or may not be FDA approved. We won't go back down that rabbit hole. That was fun though. I mean, that's the intent. I mean, that's a lot of. I mean,
I've heard that name for years on the local radio station, Compass Knox.
yeah, and I mean, yes, and for all even the one good listener we have in Ireland, you need to go ahead and subscribe because you want to learn all about Knoxville for some reason.
Learn about Knoxville.
But I mean, it's I don't know. I think it's a cool thing that they're doing. I can see it being a hard business to run in the model. I get the reasoning behind it. I understand the reasoning behind what they're doing.
A 2-man show.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff they're putting out. And I mean,
when I went to the site, I saw 2 or 3 stories. I was like, "Ooh, I want to read that." Like, "Oh, I gotta subscribe." I'm like, "Okay."
it's like $1,200, or I'm sorry,
$120.
$100 a year.
Okay.
$12 a month. If you do the monthly, it's $12. If you get the whole year, it's $100.
Right.
And he said they had 1,200 subscribers.
That's good.
Yeah, but for 2 people's income, that's $1,200 a year in income. No, 1,200 subscribers plus 00. It's 120. $60,000 a year in income. Yeah, bad math. Go me. $60,000 a year in income. But still, I mean, you got to think too, though. I mean, for that style web processing, all the paperwork, all the internet stuff that you got to pay for to do that, that's a significant sum. So that's not great money that they're doing that for. I mean, that's a
He
serious.
said at least a story a day and put in an email.
He
a
said
day.
3.
Yeah.
So they do 3 stories a day, and then the email comes out every day that has kind of a short version of some stories and links to the full stories, and stuff. So I mean, that's a lot of work for what they're doing. And I hope I hope
Probably the only service like that in town.
yeah, I hope they do well. And I like I said, we as a show, probably me as a person, but we as a show will be subscribers. I'll share my code with you guys.
We can figure out how to sponsor each other.
I mean, and to be in full disclosure for the conversation's sake, part of the reason I wanted to have him on here is because I was hoping he would do a spot for us. I was hoping it'd be like a A-to-A interview. I'm hoping that he actually does a story as a return.
Right.
Even if it's just a little whatever. So the 1,200 subscribers he has, be like, hey, I had a great interview with this local podcast that's trying to get to the bottom and trying to be part of the local politics. That they're trying to do what we do in a podcast version. Check them out. I wouldn't give one more weight than the other as far as the 2 ideas on why I reached out to him. I reached out to him because the main reason for
I don't think it's like revolves around politics. I think it's just local.
it's local stuff. But I mean, but the reason I found them in the first place was that we started talking about it. I started emailing and really Facebook messaging different political campaigns that were running to try to get them on the show. And as I'm realizing that some of these people might actually do this, I started trying to research them. And so as I'm trying to, like, Gina was the key. Gina was the first. So I researched Gina, and I got her website. I got a WBA or a WVLT story, and a Compass Knox story on my search engine. Right. So her website, okay, great. It's her website. It's going to be whatever she says. The WVLT story was literally, here's the race for District 18 state rep seat.
Just found her name in,
Right.
in an article.
And it was Gina Oster's running against Eddie Menace in the primary against Virginia Couch. End of story. Like, it was literally like, if it was 300 words of the total story, that would be the long version of it. And then, I tried to click through to theirs, and it's the paywall. And, at the time it wasn't that important to me because I didn't know how much we were really going to go down this rabbit hole, as far as how much we were really going to try on this. And, the more interviews we're doing, the more things are going on, the more it comes to realization that this is important. Like, this is something that's worth that money to me personally as a constituent, and for us as the show, it's worth paying for that. But but like I said, like, I haven't found, like, Eddie Menace has got a little bit more action on him because the mayoral run,
Right.
and he has more history politically, and so he has more press overall. But I would say outside of us, Grant Rosenberg or Kyle Ward or not Virginia Couch, but Todd Frohmeyer, like, I mean, this is coming up. We're 3 weeks out from actual election day.
Yeah, it's August
6th.
Mid-August. Is it 6th?
August
I was
6th.
thinking it was like, okay.
August 6th, and it's a Thursday, which is weird, but apparently that's normal. It's always this election is always on a Thursday. Anyway, and so anyway, I was digging into it, and
Always gets into school season and Friday night football highlights.
Yeah, don't mess with that stuff. Yeah. But so I mean, like, like.
No, but a couple months ago, when we first started getting into this, we made out a list. I think we found kind of like a pseudo ballot.
Right.
We kind of like made out a long list. We were going to try to go through all the different candidates for different districts, and there was a number that I wouldn't say I searched for hours or anything, but trying to go through at least 2 full pages of search engine results,
right,
and just totally couldn't find anything on a handful of candidates.
No, and but most of yours were like federal level ones too, right? When you were going through the list.
Yeah, there was a handful of them. I think they were more like state senate.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, apparently there's like, who were we talking to? I think it was when we were talking to Kyle Ward, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try to get Haggerty and Manny Sethi on, and he's like, oh, there's like 7. He's like, you should talk to this. He like listed 2 or 3 people, and then he said something about like there's like 5 other doctors. And so I'm assuming it's like, because Dr. Manny Sethi,
right,
and he was kind of joking about the fact that there was multiple people running for the Republican Senate seat for Tennessee, and there were a bunch of doctors. But anyway, that's like 7 or 8 people, and all I know about any of them is I've seen Manny Sethi signs and I've seen Haggerty signs.
I keep seeing their damn commercials. I'm tired of them.
And Haggerty is endorsed by Trump, and then Manny Sethi is, and I mean, the Manny Sethi commercial that I saw, at least, was it was something about like talking about like somehow we're living in a country that you go to jail if you keep your business open, but you don't go to jail if you're rioting. This was like right in the heat of the George Floyd stuff. This was the. It was, yeah. I saw that commercial. Yeah, that's what it was. I saw that commercial on the Trump Mount Rushmore YouTube when I opened it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I made a joke about it to one of the guests. I was like, yeah. So I tried to open, like I was trying to watch it because I think it's important to watch, whether I like or don't like. It doesn't matter. But I was trying to open it to watch it, and the first time I opened it, it was a Joe Biden ad, and then the Trump rally thing started.
I've seen some of those where I've watched like what would be like a predominantly left-sided. Like news thing, and it'll come up as like a Trump ad. I mean, it's definitely targeted ads, where they're trying to get those middle ground people.
Absolutely. And I think it's again, I think it's the reality.
That's where most of the general electorate are. They're kind of somewhere in between the middle.
Right, and I mean, I think this election, this presidential election coming up, is really just how much do you hate Trump? It's not about Joe Biden.
I keep seeing stories about him slipping in the polls, but I mean, it's probably the same people that kind of that was coming out, in 2016 as well. Like, oh, Trump's not going to do so good in the polls.
Right. So my boss, I talked to my boss at the other job for a minute today, and we started joking about the coin shortage thing. And he started going all conspiratorial, and I was like, you got to come on the show. You can be our official conspiracy guy. Every time you come on the show, it's got to be a new conspiracy though. You got to come on the show as a conspiracy guy. He's just like, it doesn't make any sense. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, the economy is shutting down and the coins disappear. And I was like, well, my understanding of it was apparently, and this is something you mentioned, is apparently periodically they do kind of a cull where they bring in a lot and destroy a lot.
I didn't mention that. No.
Somebody said something about that where they periodically the Federal Reserve will.
I know they
will
disintegrate bills.
Right, and they'll do like an exchange where they start to work out a bunch of old coins,
right, because they're still printing money and coins. Yeah,
and they do it as a process though. Is like periodically they'll do all right, this year we're going to do a big push on pennies, and so every time pennies come in, we're going to pull the older, grosser ones out. We're going to destroy them, and then
there's a new revived talk again. They've been talking about it for years about taking the penny out. Because it literally costs us more to produce a penny than it's worth.
Well, I mean, make the dollar suck less, and it's not that big a deal. But that's a separate conversation. That's the other part of the Federal Reserve that's a problem. But yeah, so he got all conspiratorial about it, and I was like, yeah, you got to come on the show. That'd be great.
Well, I mean, the value of the dollar is not bad compared to the rest of the world's money. So I don't think we would be able to raise the dollar enough to make the penny worth making. It would take probably.
What was it, like 2.5 cents?
Would be worth it.
We'd have to double. I don't know. It's like last time I remember seeing something about it. It was like it cost about 2.5 cents to make a penny.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than it's worth, which is something.
Right. I think it's more. I mean, a lot of people aren't spending money. I mean, you keep seeing all these, high sales numbers. I mean, because people are still going out and buying things. You can't live and not buy things.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, fucking. Realistically, right now,
society in itself has gone a lot more to using their card more and more often.
And I wish they would stop. Good God, I wish they would stop. Like, right. I would like, I mean,
I'm with you on that, but I mean, I've got a big, change jar.
Well, it's not that. It's just like, you get down to it, like, if you do the math, the real math on it, at the end of the day, you're paying for whatever it is you're buying more than you should because you're using a card. And because
you pay for the convenience of it, that you don't have to carry around 6 or 7 paper bills and a pocket full of change.
Right,
you can pull out one little square.
Right, you pay for the convenience and the tracking, and it's the question on whether or not you want that. The convenience is nice, the tracking's questionable. Like, I don't know, like I go back and forth on it, but the idea that like I use the card for work intentionally because I want it tracked, because I need it tracked, because then it's deductibles and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. But for it goes back to like our gun conversations that we had on here and stuff like that. It's like I don't necessarily need anybody else to know what I spend my money on. That's none of their business. And it always goes into this weird little thing, like my dad's one of them. It's like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then why does it matter? It's like, well, I mean...
and for the most part, I'd dare to say 90-95% of that information is sold specifically to other retailers and people that want that kind of buying information. Ad agencies that want to know that kind of information so they can better target.
Right.
Which some people see that as convenience. They're like, hey, I won't see bullshit ads anymore. I'll actually see ads that are, conveniently targeted to me.
Right, except they're ads for things that I've already bought. That's the one that kills me.
Right, but people assume, how often do you buy one thing and buy nothing else related to that?
Right. Let's say, I don't know, you go you're car shopping and you're putzing around on the internet looking for specs on the different vehicles.
No, but I'd say, companies that sell floor mats and sun visors and wind deflectors.
Yeah, it's worth a lot of money if you're an accessory person And it's worth a lot of money to get. Oh, you have 1,000 people that just bought a vehicle that I make a thing for.
Yeah,
I
so
want
I've
that.
done the same thing. It's about every car that I buy. Like you want to at least accessorize it a little bit. You know,
It's my car.
buy a couple little things.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's. Yeah, I mean I get it. It's just how I don't know. I see it as at some point. I think the line's already been crossed in certain places, but at some point I think that line there's gonna be
We're well past that line.
right. You know, and I don't, and you and I argued this in a previous episode, and it's like I'm not just because we're well past that line doesn't mean I'm okay with it.
I think that it's going back to the courts. I know we ran into it a couple of years ago with kind of the U.S. privacy laws versus the EU's privacy laws. That basically our laws aren't as strict as the EU, so it's getting into kind of an issue with like commerce, basically like internet commerce, of buying things overseas.
Right.
As far as because people in Europe buying American products and vice versa. People in Europe buying American products. Of course, America wants to make more money off of our own products. Europeans are like, we don't want our data sold.
Right.
But generally, you go on any kind of American website, you have that little window that pops up. Is almost to do anything on that website, you've got to hit, I accept, the cookies or whatever.
Right.
Or else
Yeah.
you can't even scroll through or click on
for
any
sure.
damn thing.
Yeah, and I mean it comes down to us all being okay with it and us making that an issue or not.
See, it's not much with it being okay with it. I think at that point where you literally cannot use that website, if it's something like a major website that you would use to buy, not necessarily like an Amazon, but, other major retail websites, you basically have no other choice. If you wanted to go to, Acme.com or whatever, any kind of online retailer, and it's an American company, you don't have a way to buy that unless you want to buy knockoffs.
Right, but what's the value? I mean, what is the specific value of that thing enough to offset? At the time, it's not much. Like right now,
I mean, most people, if they want to buy a pair of Levi's, and if that's what they want, that's where they've got to go to buy it. And people are just like, okay, whatever. If it's simple as them just clicking an okay or
Right.
whatever and not really having to think about it, I think most people kind of do it just kind of
right? I agree.
unknowingly, but
in the-
semi-willingly.
Right, I'm agreeing within the moment of it or whatever. But if those of us that are uncomfortable with it and are like, well, I want to buy the thing, fine, fuck, I push the button and go through the process or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, I'm not okay with that. I deal with it because I have to.
Right.
Well, how do we fix that long term? The right way would be that that enough people that are uncomfortable with it make an issue and stop using it,
I think that's
and then
David
the company
and
has
Goliath
to,
story.
right. The company has to change the policy to answer that. And is it one that the government needs to step on? This is me, devil's advocate.
Are you
This is
talking
not-
about adding in regulations?
That's why I was pre-clarifying what I was saying. This is me just talking in devil's advocate mode. But I mean, I think I don't know. I don't know, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it as a consumer decision. But I'm not. We went through this before. I'm not okay with it when the government is a customer of that data, and when the government is using, especially when the government's using kind of backdoor tactics to get that data, and it's not like they're when the state of Tennessee wants some information on its citizenry, it's not that they're going to Google and asking for it. They're going through the FCC and other powers that be that Google's got some deals with to do with the way to continue doing what they're doing. It's the backdoor dealings on the top level that are getting pushed back around to come back against us as a citizenry. So it's both sides working together against us as a citizenry that I have a problem with. And so I don't know how to fix that because I'm asking the government to fix a thing that the government is doing in collusion with a private company.
Right. I was about to say, you're basically trying to get in between major companies and government, which already had close ties for years.
Right. And that's, and again, this is something that I get stuck in argument all the time, especially when AC's here, and I mean, you and I have had it a little bit too, is that this term private company, especially when it applies to certain industries, it's not an accurate statement. When I say private company, I think of a company that is operating in the private sector that has no influence over the regulations that are put upon them, that has no influence over the
As far as they're not getting government contracts and they don't have lobbies,
whether it's
or
government
lobbyists.
contracts or not, but like, maybe, I don't know, like Max and I, we are a private company, and to me, a private company is a company that operates inside the system that exists. They have no influence on the system other than whatever it is they do. So they can't, like Max and I can't change, the example right now is the state of Tennessee has not changed their smoking age law. And so we are operating inside that to our benefit because the federal law has changed. But we have no influence over that other than as citizens, we can say, hey, this is not cool. If you're allowed to go fight and die for our country, you can smoke a cigarette, for fuck's sake. It's stupid. That'd be the argument that we would pitch to our as citizens to that. It's like, this doesn't make sense. It's not fair. It's dumb. That would be the argument. But that would be the entirety of the argument. It wouldn't be like, oh, well, if you do this, you're going to take away this much tax revenue that we're collecting for you and all that kind of stuff. And we could even pitch that one. But it's still, we don't have some real influence on the government making the decisions. Where Google does, Facebook does, Boeing and all those different big animals that we always talk about, but the major medical companies do, the major pharmaceuticals do, to stay on topic, is these hospitals, and I can't remember the term now, but I brought it up before. There is a certificate of need. That's the term. You have to, if you and I wanted to pool our money together and open a hospital. I don't know exactly how the word hospital is defined legally to the government, but if you and I wanted to open a hospital, we have to apply through a certificate of need. And the people who get to vote on whether that certificate of need is valid include the governing bodies of the other hospitals. So, Tenova, Fort Sanders, UT Hospital.
Right.
They get to decide whether they have a competitor in town. It's their decision. It's not my decision as a business owner who wants to start a business. It's not our decision as a populace that, oh, that'd be a great place to have a hospital. It'd be really nice to have a hospital right there. We would use that hospital. It's nobody's decision unless the other hospitals in the region are okay with it. That is not private companies. So to keep on that example, if Fort Sanders has the ability to say no, a competitor cannot exist against me in this area, that is not private company.
That's why there's more hospital acquisitions versus actual new hospitals opening.
I don't know. I don't know if that explains. I'm sure that explains part of what's happening, because you can't say no to a different owner of the hospital that already exists, right. And so you don't have to fight that kind of battle. That was the thing I was trying to bring up in whatever episode we talked about that. But again, and so that's not a private company. That you're not operating against the normal, air quotes, normal, playing field of business. I operate on the normal playing field of business. There's fucking 30 something other vape shops in Knoxville. I have no influence to be like, oh, well, they want to open a second store? No, it's good. I've got one over here already. We don't need another one. And there's probably some legitimate premise behind the certificate of need, in that it's like, well, we don't want to put two hospitals on top of each other and then
one undercut the other.
Oh, no, that's fucking great. For you and me, that's great. We want hospitals undercutting each other.
True.
And so it's not in our best interest on that point. But I get it in the sense that if there's some government funding in place, like if you have a hospital that you get, that there's some sort of government funding behind it, that you don't want to have 15 hospitals that you all guarantee a certain amount of funding to as a municipality, and the region only needs 10. And so having an extra hospital means extra tax dollars go into hospitals.
Yeah. But
again, not private company. You're dependent on tax dollars, and which I think, where did I hear this? It's a contract. The indigent care thing, that is a contract with the county or the local municipality. So Fort Sanders, for example, if Like a homeless guy gets picked up off the side of the street and gets brought to Fort Sanders. Fort Sanders bills Knox County. There's a contract in place between the hospitals and the county.
So I know we kind of talked about that before. I just always assumed that hospitals kind of wrote that off.
They get there is a contract in there, and it's not value. I mean, it's not value for the work done by any means, but there's a contract in place.
Something better than nothing.
Right. There's a contract in place with the county that says, as a hospital operating in this county, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. We're not going to give you a permit to be a hospital or a license or whatever is involved in making a hospital. We're not going to give you that if but here's the contract. If you're willing to do this contract, then you can have your license to be a hospital. And part of that contract is, there will be people sent to your hospital through whether it's, Knoxville Fire Department and ambulatory services that are city operated services take somebody to your hospital. You got to take care of them.
Right.
It's not a thing that the hospital wants to do that. They're obligated to do that by somewhere in their permit and licensing process. And so that was an interesting thing I learned on that aspect. So again, my point being is that they're not private companies. And so they're using they're privately owned, air quotes, but it's not a proper use of the word, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. And so when we get into arguments about it and AC says it's more complicated, it's like, he's right. It's more complicated because we're misusing the word. And that's important to me.
Then there's a lot of that goes on behind the scenes.
Right. But it's important to me that we define, or that we at least acknowledge that it's not true private industry. Because a private industry, and this is what my girl Jo Jorgensen's on. Vote Joe Jorgensen, not Biden. Anyway, if we had real normal competition going on between businesses, and those businesses were hospitals, you and I as a customer would be better off, because we would have more options. Forget insurance. Take insurance out of the conversation. You want to be the hospital. Again, I want to be the store that people come shop at for their vape products. There are things that I have to do to ensure that. Pricing is one of them. Customer service is another one of them. The decor, the feel, the comfort that we put in place. The whole image is there. Every restaurant you ever go to, that's the game they play. There are, when I was working for O'Charlie's back in the day, they did a whole revamp on the system, and we had this stupid fucking training seminar. But there's something that stuck with me, and it sticks with me to this day, and I try to apply it as often as I can at the shop. Is we're O'Charlie's. Every O'Charlie's in the state of Tennessee, there's an Applebee's within a half a mile. There's a Chop House. There's a whole, because when you see it, every time you see a restaurant, there's always 15 around it. They're always kind of clumped together,
right.
And it does well, and it's good for everybody in a larger economic sense. But at the end of the day, O'Charlie's pitch in this whole thing was, it's like, we don't do anything that much better food wise than anybody else. We think we have a better burger. We think we have better chicken tenders, but they're not enough that you're not going to O'Charlie's for chicken tenders more than you're going for Applebee's for chicken tenders.
Right.
The only way we are better than Applebee's is if we out-service them. If we are better servers, if we have a better decor, if we have a cleaner building, all these little things. And that was their whole push. And at the time, I was like, you guys are stupid. This is dumb. Can I go back to work? Because I'm not getting paid much for this stupid training thing. I get paid more when I'm working. But in hindsight, I look back at it, and it's like they were dead right. They failed miserably at execution on this thing. But the premise is dead right. Is that I can go 15 places and get a good, solid chicken tender dinner. But the place I'm going to go to is the place that I feel best about while I'm doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's something that doesn't exist in hospitals. It just doesn't exist.
True.
Unless you're on the high end.
You're not going there to see it's my favorite nurse. You might go to your doctor's office, or
but it's
the
right.
same critical care clinic. Because you're more likely to possibly get that same nurse or that same care.
Right. You get the high echelon, and you have concierge doctors or something like that. That's a different animal, but that's past the point of normal people. And I think that is not going to exist. Period. In the hospital industry, in the system we have. And again, my whole point in this whole thing is that it's misuse of the word private, and that pisses me off. It's the same thing, and there's a couple different industries that we've pitched at where it's private, but it's not. like the private prisons thing too. That's another one. They're not private prison. I mean, they're privately owned, but they don't operate privately because I can't open a prison next door. Be like, hey, I'll take 10 guys. I'll charge you half as much. Yeah. You can't do that. They won't say okay to that.
I got cinder block boxes too.
Right. I have to go through so much. You have to go through so much mountain of red tape and stuff that by the other side of it, there's only a few people that play, and only those few people that play are going to be able to flex what they want to out of the government that's paying them, instead of normal business operations where you're actually competing. And so I don't know. I took this chance to get that part out because that frustrates me.
Did you get that off your chest?
Not really, but I got a little bit of it out there.
Feel a little bit of weight off your shoulders.
No, because I wanted to say it in front of everybody else, but if I wouldn't have had the chance, I would have gotten interrupted. Hold on, it's more complicated than that. Or I don't even know what Max would have said to that. He'd have been like, but it's privately owned. It's like, it's not accurate. It's just, I don't know. It's a specific term that bothers me that we use that phrase a lot, and I think we use it inaccurately. And I think that's something that we personally, but we as a society need to fix. There's a lot of companies out there that get to fly the private banner that it's not true. Federal Reserve is one. That's a private company. And that's gross. Federal Reserve is fucking gross. Talking about our penny value.
I don't know if it's anything like the beer industry. I know there was issue with, I think there was some, I don't know if it was baseball or football stadiums. There were some quote-unquote craft beer companies that have been bought out by major companies. And there was a big debate, I guess, of like I think there's an actual like craft brewers association of like smaller brewers.
Right.
And they were like, hey, you can't, because they were advertising at the stadiums themselves as like, their craft brew corner and at that, concourse or whatever. And they were like, no, that is not craft brew. Like that is still made by, Miller. That's still made by Budweiser. Like you can't label yourself as craft beer if you're still owned by a major corporation. And there's a whole big debate about, there's an actual line of how much barrels you brew per year to be considered, I think, a craft brewery. Like after that, you're considered, I guess, just a normal brewery.
Yeah, I don't know what that number is either. That's curious. I know that there's like the Independent Beer Association. That's the they got a label that you can get.
Yeah.
And it's like the upside down beer bottle.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
Yeah, that's the Independent Brewing Association. All right, well, Almost in Agreement, episode 19. We really appreciate Jesse Mayshard coming in. Check out CompassKnox.com. They were killer. Close out with some horns.
Beats.
Oh, yeah, by the way, Eddie Manis is supposed to be coming in on Wednesday. If he doesn't, I'm going to trash him next week.